So we spent most of chapter 3 talking about nouns and the different cases of the nouns and grammatical functions. In chapter 4, we've now moved on to verbs. And for the purposes of introduction, I want to talk about the 5 characteristics of a verb. The first 3 are things we're going to talk about a lot this year, and then the last 2 we'll delve into more next year. But it's good to know just an overview of verbs, just to kind of know where we are and where we're going, and how we're going to be approaching our discussion of verbs. So the 5 characteristics are person, number, tense, voice, and mood. And as I said, this year we're definitely going to talk a lot about person, number, and tense. Those are going to be 3 words you're going to hear from me a lot. You'll be telling me the person, number, and tense. I'll be giving them to you, and you'll be putting a verb in the person, number, and tense. Voice and mood will show up much more sophomore year, but again, just to get an overall idea of how verbs work, it's nice to learn these all at once just to have them in your back pocket. When we talk about the person of a verb, it is usually in relation to the speaker. First person, if a person is speaking in the first person, that means he or she is kind of speaking about him or herself. So a first person verb is either I or we. I like chocolate, we went to the store. That's first person, I'm talking about myself. Second person verbs are in relation to the audience. So it's going to be either you or y'all. So, you are pretty, y'all are listening very attentively. Again, I'm still doing the speaking, but the addressees are the second person. And then third person is generally referring to someone or something that's in another room. So it's either going to be, he, she, or it, or they. So, first, second, third refers, generally to a relationship between the speaker and the verb. First person, the speaker is the subject. Second person, the listener is the subject. And third person, it's somebody in the other room. So number is a little more straightforward. It's either going to be singular or plural. We know the difference between singular and plural. Singular is one thing, plural is more than one. The only tricky thing about number is that if I ask you what number is this verb, the answer is not a number. The answer is either singular or plural. So that trips people up sometimes. But of the examples I gave in the last slide, singular verbs were either the ones with I, you, or he, she, or it is the subject. And then plural verbs will either have we, y'all, or they as a subject. So if you divide the subjects I talked about in the previous slide down the middle, the left-hand ones, I, you, he, she, it, were singular. The right-hand ones, we, y'all, they, were plural. When we talk about the tense of a verb, we're talking about its temporal relationship to the here and now. So a present tense verb is going on right now. It's happening today. I am speaking. You sit. We eat dinner. Those are all present tense verbs. In English, we talk about past tense verbs. Latin actually has 3 different past tense verbs: the imperfect, the perfect, and the pluperfect. So we're not actually going to use the term past. If I ask the tense of a verb, it's going to be imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect if it's happened previously. And that could be, yesterday, it could be last week, it could be 10 years ago. So yesterday, I taught a class. That is the perfect tense verb. 3 years ago, I was living in another house. That's the imperfect tense. When I went to college, I had thought I was going to study physics. That's pluperfect with the had. But those all happened previously to this moment. And then the future tense, we're actually not going to see the future tense until way at the end of next year. But the future tense is something that's happening after today. So tomorrow, I will rake the leaves in my yard. So that is a future tense verb. But when we talk about tense, present, happening now, imperfect, pluperfect, and perfect, previously, future, sometime, after, right now. Now, voice we're not going to deal with much, but it's just good to be aware of it. Active and passive. In an active voice verb, the subject is doing the action of the verb. And so you would have an example like, I hit the ball. I am the subject, I am doing the hitting, That is an active verb. The passive is the subject is receiving the action of the verb. So that would be, I was hit by the ball. So I hit the ball, I'm doing the hitting, I was hit, I'm being hit by the ball, I'm no longer doing the hitting, I'm receiving that action. I see versus I am seen. It can be any person. The girl heard a noise, and the noise was heard by the girl. The girl hears a noise, that's active. The noise was heard, that's passive. English teachers hate the passive voice. In very many instances, they can be kind of weak. Latin loves the passive. So all those times you've been told never use the passive voice, you're going to have to set that aside, especially next year in Latin, because Latin loves the passive voice. And then finally, mood is either indicative or subjunctive. The indicative mood is just a normal verb that states a fact. We are going to be only dealing with indicative verbs this year. I see, he laughs, they were running, we will eat. Those are all indicative verbs. Subjunctive verbs, there's not one way to define a subjunctive verb. In English, the subjunctive verb is often called the woulda, coulda, shoulda verb, insofar as it does not talk about facts. I would have become an astronaut if I had 20/20 vision. That's the subjunctive. If only I could have gone to Harvard. That's the subjunctive. Man, I really should have eaten a healthier breakfast. That's the subjunctive in English. In Latin, the subjunctive is used for a lot of very specific purposes. But mainly, what you need to know about the subjunctive is it is almost always in a subordinate clause, which means it is not very often going to be the main verb in a sentence. But again, we're not going to deal with subjunctive much until next year. So for now, person, number, tense is the most important thing. I like you to know that there's such a thing as a voice and a mood, because those are words we'll toss around here and there, but we won't use them a lot until next year.